Hello, and welcome to this episode of, I guess we're calling it Category Management Musings. Before I proceed, obviously, I would like to make sure that I wish all of you and pray for your safety, your family safety, and your colleagues. So, hope you're all staying safe and pray that you continue to do so. As we mentioned last time, we were going to use our maturity model as the vehicle to have these discussions with you around category management. And last time, I think we covered strategy, and the next domain in our maturity model is risk management. And obviously, given what's going on today, it's a very, very timely topic. So like I said, we talked about strategy last time. We will cover risk management this time. If you're not familiar with our maturity model, please do drop us a line, reach out to us. You can probably find it on our website. Otherwise, just drop us a line and we'll be more than happy to send you the detailed maturity model. It's actually quite interesting reading. And that's where maybe I want to start, because one of the things that I want to point out is the maturity model that we are referring to was last updated about 10 years ago. And it's probably time for another refresh and update now, given what we're going through today. But what I'm going to point out to you is some of the things that we talked about when we published this maturity model 10 years ago and how they are so relevant still today. And I think you'll find it quite surprising. But let me just start by making a couple of observations. And the major observation is that the expectations for our function, the expectations for us as a professional have changed, and they have changed dramatically, and they have changed permanently, meaning that this is not some kind of a temporary change that we have to live through somehow over the next 3-6 months, and things will go back to normal, because they won't. And in fact, they should not. And so that's one of the things that I want to make sure we cover, that what is expected of us as a function, whatever we thought was going to work yesterday is not going to work today. And that's where I want to build my argument, as I was saying earlier, building on the maturity model and what we talked about a few years ago. So as we have explained to you, we developed this maturity model many years ago. We have constantly updated it. One of the domains in that maturity model is risk management, and that's what we're covering today. In the last revision we did to the maturity model, what used to be called strategic sourcing is still called that. That was the highest level of maturity in our model, which was a level 5. In about a decade ago, 10 years ago, we dropped strategic sourcing from being a level 5 to a level 4. And that may catch a few of you by surprise. And we did that 10 years ago because we defined a new level, level 5, which at that time we called value creating, and subsequently we've started calling category management. And so what I would like to do is to read off 3 or 4 attributes from the maturity model from about 10 years ago as it relates to risk management. And these are what we call level 5 attributes, meaning that if you wanted us to rank you or benchmark you as a level 5 organization 10 years ago, we would have looked at a number of domains, one of them being risk management, and this is what we would have told you that we were expecting out of you as a function. And I'm only going to read off a handful of them just to make my point. The first one is that black swan modeling to link remote events that could severely compound and affect the organization. So I'm going to let that sink in for a moment. But 10 years ago, we would have told you that we expect you, if you're operating at a level 5 in our maturity model, to be able to do this and to be doing this constantly. Frequent modeling of second and third order effects of marketplace events. So this is another attribute. Surety of supply is part of the corporate risk management plan. And here's another one, number 4, and there's a whole bunch of others, but I'm just reading 4 to you. And the 4th one is procurement or sourcing or supply chain, whatever you're called, is leading risk management across the enterprise. So the question that I want to pose to you, a rhetorical question, is: had you been doing these things and trying to get to a level 5, and you started 10 years ago, would you not have been at the forefront of your recovery process as you compare yourself to your competitors? Meaning, you would have had a significant advantage in terms of how quickly you were able to respond to this unplanned event. And so the point we're trying to make here is that what we need to do as an organization has been known to us. We're not, the most brilliant, smartest people on earth in our function. So if we were talking about this 10 years ago, I'm sure others of our colleagues were also discussing this at that time. The issue is that we have not been able to do any of those things. And that really is a fundamental issue with risk management also, which is that the biggest challenge is not in knowing what the risks are or analyzing those risks or understanding those risks. The biggest challenges are getting the organization moving in the direction of decisions and action. And so that is why we have always classified risk management as a very strategic process and function, which is why we've always said it requires strategic competencies, because anybody, including third-party software, anybody can produce risk analysis and brilliant risk analysis. It's getting the organization or your stakeholders to take decision and action on that analysis. That's the biggest challenge. Now, you've heard us talk about this before, because the next point I want to make is that most of the things, and this is tied to what I just discussed, that most of the things that we look at when we take a look at risk management, including, by the way, COVID and coronavirus, is that they are predictable and inevitable, meaning that with a very high degree of certainty, we know that they're going to occur, and we know pretty much what the impact is going to be. The only thing that we don't know is when. Will it occur in the next 6 months, or will it occur in the next 5 years? So you would have to agree, and if you listen to any of the experts on the news today, you will hear this concept very, very clearly. Almost all of them will tell you that this was not an unpredictable event, that we knew this was going to happen, we should have known this was going to happen, and we should not be caught unprepared for events like this. It used to be SARS and MERS and H1N1 till yesterday. It is COVID today, and it will be ABCD tomorrow. But this type of event will occur again. And so we must keep that in mind. Similarly, for example, if you remember Hurricane Sandy a few years ago, caused immense amount of damage, but again, that was not an unpredictable or inevitable event. Authorities knew it was going to happen. They knew what the impact was going to be. They just didn't know when. And so the next Sandy will occur on the East Coast. We just don't know when, and authorities will again be caught unprepared because we are incapable of moving into decision and action, apparently, even though we know what the risk analysis tells us. Similarly, you may remember the major fiasco that Boeing went through, not the recent one, but I'm talking about the Dreamliner, when they had outsourced almost the entire design and production of that, and led to all kinds of overruns and delays, and you remember that whole fiasco. And even then, I still remember one of the leading risk management experts that Boeing had internally. This is not somebody external. And there was a quote that we have often used in our presentation, but it basically said that all the predicted cost and risks that have already materialized, they knew about. And that's almost directly a verbatim quote that I'm giving you. The point being that whatever occurred, these were all predictable and inevitable issues and challenges that Boeing knew and should have known, but did not take any action to prevent till after it had occurred. Because the point is that we must be challenged and challenge ourselves. And we haven't quite defined or come up with a cute name for this yet, but we must always focus on how do we reduce our response lead time to events like this. It was interesting. We were just talking. In fact, if you're interested in hearing more about this, join us for our upcoming PERT webinar or town hall on COVID. It's on May 19th from 1 to 3 p.m. Central Time. And you can go to our website and find the link to register. But I would encourage you, because we have a leading expert on how to respond to unplanned events like this from a supply chain perspective speaking. And in speaking to him, and by the way, it's a group purchasing organization, and they represent many companies. And so he was challenged in standing up a $250 million supply chain within 6 days to meet the demands of their customers. And I have to imagine, how would you ever be able to do that? And this was related to PPE, which, all of a sudden nobody ever wanted to buy gloves and masks, and now everybody wants millions and millions of them just to be able to open up their facilities. And so his challenge was, how do you stand up a $250 million supply chain in 6 days when in fact you were not buying any of this product before? And so that's a great illustration of how do you constantly try to figure out how do you reduce or minimize the response lead time. And that should be a goal for all of us. Because at the end of the day, this is a very strategic process, risk management. It is directly tied to shareholder value. And that is why it deserves the kind of attention that we're talking about. The other thing that I want to quickly mention also is, again, this is pre-COVID. We had published, these 2020 trends for our function. And again, if you're interested, drop us a line. We'll send you a copy. You can find it on our website. And risk was one of the domains we had talked about. And again, you will find some of the points we raised before this event occurred are very, very relevant to the event also. Because we talked about looking at how do you optimize portfolio risk. And unless you are looking at it from a portfolio perspective, you may never have figured out that you had concentration risk because a number of your tier 1 and your tier 2 suppliers were located in or around Wuhan, and therefore you were going to suffer major disruption of your supply. And so that's a great example of looking at it from a portfolio risk perspective. The other comment, for example, we made when we made these predictions was that increased competency in risk management equals a competitive advantage for you as a company. And it could not be, any more true based on current events today. Because if you have an increased competency that is helping you recover from this event or cut down your response lead time significantly to the event, clearly you are enjoying a competitive advantage over your customers. And so strategic competencies become a very, very critical issue because this is not a technology solution. And strategic competencies like change management or consulting, which is something that if you've been following our thinking on this topic, you have heard for a long, long time. That is what you need because this sudden shift in the value drivers of your stakeholders, or if you want to call them decision factors, you must have the type of strategic competencies found in things like consulting and change management to be able to get those, dramatic shifts in those decision drivers. For example, right now, from cost, a little bit less emphasis on cost and price perhaps, and much more on surety of supply. You have to have the right set of competencies in your organization to work with your stakeholders, to be able to identify them in a proactive way, identify all those risks, align them to your stakeholders and their value drivers, because unless you do that, back to the first point I raised, you will not be able to get your organization to move towards decision and action. And so that's why these strategic competencies become very, very critical. So with that, I will end the discussion for today. But let me end with 3 points. Just to kind of summarize, what are the 3 takeaways that you need to be thinking about? So the first is that the timing unfortunately, the current events are providing us with perfect timing. I call it carpe diem, seize the day, because this is the time to convince your stakeholders to start thinking about this whole issue of risk management differently, so that when it comes time for decision and action from your stakeholders, it becomes a little easier. But right now, the timing is perfect for you to be able to convince them of going down this route. Second, your most critical resource to help you in terms of risk management is going to be your people, meaning the competencies that they have. And if they don't have the strategic competencies they need, then now is the time to make sure you start building those competencies, because it's too late to count on those competencies when you need them and you don't have them. Because building competencies takes X amount of time and it cannot be rushed. So we would encourage you to do that. And the third one is that this collaborative relationship with your suppliers, or as we call it, supplier relationship optimization instead of supplier relationship management, will be the biggest challenge you will face in terms of convincing your stakeholders, your staff, and everybody else that you need to look at your suppliers differently. So with that, I end. I wish you again a safe time for you, your family, and your colleagues. And if you ever have any questions or would like to follow up on this, please do drop us a line and we will be happy to respond to you. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to Category Management Musings. This podcast is provided by the Empower Group and is intended to provide general information only. The podcast is not intended to constitute advice or services of any kind. For additional information about the Empower Group, please go to www.theempowergroup.com. We also release new podcasts regularly, and if you subscribe, you won't miss an episode. Follow us on iTunes Podcasts or Spotify. Please leave a review on your podcast app, and please invite others to listen. To stay connected and receive more information on the Empower Group service offerings, visit www.theempowergroup.com/services and follow us on Twitter @theempowergroup.